The left's normalization of collective guilt is ripping America apart. All decent Americans stand against racism. But if we are to live as brothers, we must stop indicting all those who share a skin tone for the sins of others. In this expose, we will reference the June 5th article by Joshua Lawson of The Federalist.
In this piece, Mr. Lawson explains how the leftist agenda of mainstreaming the notion that Caucasians bore collective guilt for all of America's past sins began decades ago. Also, we will talk about how this agenda also included the branding of innocent white Americans for the sins of others. We will reveal the logical fallacy regarding the statistics of black-on-black homicides. Also, we show how American businesses are joyfully hopping on the blame game bandwagon. We will expose the little-known lie of the so-called 1619 Project that falsely claims that America was built on slavery. Will these long-rooted leftist lies meant to guilt and enrage Americans pull our nation further apart? Or will the truth that America was founded on the principle that all men are created equal be resurrected in popular opinion? We shall see. Lastly, we will tackle the immense challenge of rebuilding America, one brother and one sister at a time. And if you like what we do here at The Conservative Take, please consider hitting that like and subscribe buttons, as well as the bell icon, so that you will be notified for any future content. Now here is why liberal white guilt is destroying the country and what must be done about it. Let's begin.
Most Americans were nowhere near the intersection of Chicago Avenue and 38th Street when George Floyd tragically lost his life. Except for state residents, none were in Minnesota. In fact, with the exception of the officers at that heartbreaking scene, there are more than 322 million additional Americans who had no part in that terrible evening. So why are so many people acting as if it was their knee, not Derek Chauvin's, that pressed down on George Floyd? The answer lies in the concerted effort of radical leftists and their unwitting accomplices to normalize the collectivization of guilt. It's nothing entirely new. In 1980, Howard Zinn and his Marxist, ahistorical, and repugnant textbook, A People's History of the United States, began mainstreaming the idea that Caucasians bore collective guilt for all of America's past sins. By securing the blessings of the academic intelligentsia, he had support in the most valuable places. Thankfully, Zinn didn't have modern-day social media at his disposal. One shudders to think how wide Zinn's reach could have been with a few million followers on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. But if you've looked around the social media landscape recently, you would have witnessed the unleashing of a radical movement beyond its wildest dreams. Leftist influencers have convinced millions of Americans that the only way they will be allowed in polite society, only way they will be perceived as decent, is if they accept culpability for Floyd's death and the systematic racist society they apparently helped create. The radical left demands Caucasians apologize for their privilege. They must read, internalize, and publicly praise books on approved reading lists in order to come to grips with their unconscious and deep-seated racism. They must shop at black-owned businesses on websites like WeBuyBlackBook.com, TheBlackWallet.com, and ShopBlack.us as further proof of their solidarity. But is there much doubt that if the color was changed from black to white, that the Southern Poverty Law Center wouldn't label these sites sources of hate? On June 2nd, Instagram was flooded with people posting pictures of black boxes in support of Black Lives Matter activists. Quickly, however, an ever-growing list of suggestions muddled the rules of who should post in what manner was pleasing to the Blackout Tuesday folks. Actress and feminist activist Emma Watson was attacked on Twitter for both posting the boxes and for taking so long. You can't win. It was always good to remind people not to be racist, though it is doubtful just how much reminding is needed between the legacy media, television, and movies all constantly promoting that message. What's sad is that so many good, utterly non-racist Americans feel if they don't go through the approved steps, they'll be roped together with the actual white supremacists. Not to be left out, businesses from coffee chains to game developers also feel they must denounce what we have always known to be evil, namely the unwarranted taking of another human life. It would be ridiculous and unjust to blame a 20-year-old Russian for the heinous atrocities committed by Joseph Stalin more than 70 years ago. It would still be unjust to blame a 90-year-old woman who lived in the Soviet Union while Stalin was alive for the millions who died under his tyrannical rule. According to crime statistics compiled by the FBI and the U.S. Department of Justice, 2,925 Black Americans were murdered in 2018. The details show that 88% of the perpetrators of these homicides were Black themselves. Yet no logical, honest person would blame all Black Americans for these deaths. To do so would throw blood on innocent hands. The radical left, however, has been attempting this sort of collectivization of guilt with renewed vigor ever since the New York Times published its first 1619 Project essays in August of 2019. The 1619 Project isn't about making you feel contempt and anger for those who brought the first Black slaves from Africa to Virginia 4 centuries ago. It's about making the Caucasians and all Westerners feel as if they piloted the slave ships themselves. Its main thesis, and a heinous lie, is that America is an irredeemable, vile nation conceived in sin. In a disturbing example of the confluence of the 1619 Project and modern corporate guilt tripping, Ben & Jerry's issued a statement that reads like an updated version of the radical Port Huron Manifesto. Only it's angrier and more incendiary. What does an ice cream company have to do with any of this? You're not allowed to ask. Sit down and take your medicine. The murder of George Floyd, the Dowry brothers proclaim, was the result of inhumane police brutality that was perpetrated by a culture of white supremacy. What happened to George Floyd was not the result of a bad apple. It was the predictable consequence of a racist and prejudiced system and culture that has treated Black bodies as the enemy from the very beginning. Then to prove their outrage bona fides, they go for the gold and tag 1619 for their finisher. What happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis is the fruit born of toxic seeds planted on the shores of our country in Jamestown, 1619, when the first enslaved men and women arrived on this continent. The statement closes by calling on white America to collectively acknowledge its privilege and take responsibility for its past. Of the host of problems with the screed published by Ben & Jerry's is that even if it were legitimate for Americans to take responsibility for all the nation's past sins, not only is it functionally impossible to do so, but radical leftists aren't interested. That's not the point. The point is to keep the anger machine firing on all cylinders. That's the only way to get the permanent revolution thereafter. Unlike the sin that man commits to his fellow man, for the authors of the 1619 Project, there is no hope for forgiveness, no chance for reconciliation, no way to atone. If, as the 1619 advocates claim, the seeds are toxic and the tree is poisonous, then the only thing left to do is burn it all down. Nicole Hannah-Jones, the author of the lead 1619 essay, recently told CBS News, destroying property which can be replaced is not violence.
Looting. There is a bit of a raging debate, I think, in this country about how you express dissent.
Destroying property which can be replaced is not violence.
While all Americans are created equal, Pulitzer Prizes are certainly not. Americans want to stand with those peacefully protesting injustice, but the radical left offers either the choice of self-condemnation for evils America had no hand in, or to be silent and stay that way. If the second option is chosen, that very silence is viewed as an indictment of complicity, often seen by the left as akin to violence itself. Ultimately, that's no choice at all. It now appears that Minneapolis policeman Derek Chauvin will be charged with second-degree murder. Justice will be served, and Chauvin will be tried by a judge and a jury of his peers. If the court finds him guilty, the penalty, 40 years in prison, will be harsh but fair. It's horrible, it's sad, and it's tragic. But George Floyd will not be the last man to die at the hands of law enforcement. The next time a life is lost to an abuse of police power, it must be denounced once again, and the perpetrator is subjected to our civilized courts of trial, deliberation, and justice. but we need to start finally viewing each other as individuals responsible for our actions, and our actions alone. Every day we commit personal acts of vice, virtue, and all shades in between. As individual men and women, we bear the guilt and reap the penalties for our own sins and crimes. As individual men and women, we earn praise for righteous behavior. This nation isn't just built on freedom and equality. Central to the American experience is the chance for a new life, and with it, redemption. If we surrender that, we will be left with far too much anger and hatred, and we won't like what follows.
But what do you think? What are your thoughts on the leftist, white guilt-riddled agenda? Do you think America will finally reject this insane socialist form of thinking? Let us know in the comments below, or jump over to our Discord server, where you can not only interact with us and others via text, voice, or video, but you will also have access to all of our archived research materials that we use to create our videos. The link is in the description. If you enjoy the content on The Conservative Take, please hit those like and subscribe buttons, the bell icon, and please share with your friends. It really helps to grow the channel as we have set a goal to reach 10,000 subscribers. Also, please check out some more videos that we have right here.